Hello, hello, as you may have suspected, my name is Day 9, and this is the G4 StarCraft 2 Pro-Am presented by NVIDIA. In the top right, we have a player under the ID Random Kawi, but you might know him better as Inuh, I-N-U-H. And the bottom left, the player who you do know very, very well in my favorite color to play StarCraft 2 as the yellow pieces. It is Liquid Jinro. Poor Jinro has not been putting good results on the table, even in this tournament, taking some pretty bitter losses to players like Sake. However, Jinro has been practicing a lot, and there's always eyes on him, trying to see that huge resurgence. I mean, he took third, fourth place in the GSL twice in a row, which, as you'll note, is a fairly non-trivial achievement. But everyone has their slump, and we're all hoping Jinro can break out of it. But his opponent will be the Terran player inuh, who is known to have pretty reasonably solid play. inuh is not one of those players like, you know, Thorzane, or someone who will regularly be at the top, a player like a QXC or an MMA, but he's definitely one of those slightly behind that top tier of Terran player who can always deliver good results and take games off good players. I still remember when I was saying the same thing about Thorzane. LOL. There is the barracks going down now for Random Kawi, who I will do my best to call inuh, but interestingly, Jinro's going for a gas first build. You'll notice I politely pulled the microphone away before clearing my throat, but as I'm musing, I'm noticing that this is an opening that has not been done very much as of late. It's a pretty fun way. You get a really, really fast factory right when this barracks finishes. You can plant the factory down. You end up getting your orbital command on 16 rather than 15. However, you can get your tech up so much more quickly. A lot of players like this for the early aggression opportunities it allows. You can do Banshee, Marine, Hellion pushes, and all that goody goodness. I would most likely expect some sort of very fast Banshee with no second gas. That's the most typical style that you see pop out of this. So we do see here's the barracks finishing up right now, and wow, Jinro managing his economy quite well. Is going to get the orbital command down right as the barracks finishes, and will immediately be building a factory. And as we go back to Camp Random Kawi, aka inuh, we see that he hasn't even started a factory yet, so going to be a little bit behind Jinro on the tech, but I mean, if you can just think about how much a few seconds counts in this matchup, I mean, if you get your blue flame started just 10-20 seconds ahead of your opponent when that first engagement happens, that's going to make all the difference. One Marine is out right now for Jinro, heading down to his natural, and per usual, doing that very responsible pro-gamer-esque move. He is going to just scout all around his own base. It's always interesting to note how active you will see those early units from those tip-top players. Factory's almost now done, has just enough to be able to get an early starport, and interestingly, wow, actually getting a pretty fast second gas. Ordinarily, when you do this build, you don't want to get the gas too quickly because you're already sacrificing a good bit of minerals getting your first gas quickly, but Jinro, he is someone who I would say, I guess he knows what he's doing. He's been known to, I don't know, train in Korea professionally for a year. So I believe him, as we'll likely expect a tech lab thrown down there. Ah, clairvoyance, deflam. Thank you, brain. Thank you for that insight. So we do see inuh now going for his very own factory starport. It's a little interesting. Generally, with this kind of placement, you are encouraging hidingness. You don't really want to have any sort of reveal. Your opponent will generally scan around here and not be able to see both structures. Could be some kind of Banshee opening, but given this placement, I mean, the fact that they're not snuggling up to each other, yep, it looks a little bit more like the Blue Flame Hellion. Always a very, very strong opening on this map, because look at how much ridge you have on this right side. Such a huge area to protect, and even if you can sneak over here to the left, it can be a little potent. And wow, Jinro going straight for the Banshee. That's quite fast. I'm actually very impressed with Jinro's ability to have gotten all these little key components up. I mean, there's the Banshee, there's the Cloak. In the unit counting station, Jinro has 3 Marines and a Hellion. Even positioning the 3 Marines here, I mean, Jinro's cutting a ton of corners to get this up this quickly. It's going to be a little tricky, though. This is an all-out pressure opening by Jinro. You always have to be very careful with how you defend. A second Banshee coming up. And there's the scan, so right now inuh sees everything that Liquid Jinro is doing. But meanwhile, does Jinro actually know anything? It looks like no, he is completely in the dark. He's actually just patrolling back and forth. This is an interesting little play. Rarely ever seen someone patrol back and forth, but he will get a reasonable vision opportunity with that. And uh-oh, here's the 3 Blue Flame Hellions loaded up, and it looks like Jinro's going to completely miss it. Oh, man. Oh, if Jinro's keeping his eye out, he's going to see that there's no tanks. Accidentally runs right into the starport, and he's going to take a little skirting approach. Doesn't want to dart directly in. Wants to make sure he has at least a little bit of ridge where he can retreat along. But in the meantime, we do see those blue flame Hellions moving up along the top of the map. This could be very, very dangerous. Now we see Jinro now moving to the far backside. Wow, Jinro's going to be shut down cold. Ugh! Runs right into a turret, takes some hits from the Viking. But we'll be pulling back. I think that the one thing that is not said enough, the main reason players get Cloak is so that they can have a safe retreat home, because so much of the time, oh no, Jinro loses it for nothing. Ah, that's such sloppy play. But keep in mind, 3 turrets built from inuh, going a little bit above and beyond what's needed. Meanwhile, the blue flame Hellions from inuh moving in. Jinro has managed to get an orbital command started. He's getting himself his own blue flame Hellions and a Raven, and there the blue flame Hellions are getting unloaded. He doesn't even see them, and there they move in, immediately getting some shots off on the SCVs, taking some big damage. Oh, Jinro clustered him up pretty severely, but does a reasonable spread in the unit counting station. Ugh, did he really lose 11 workers? Wow, 12 workers? At this point in time, I mean, if you go to the units lost tab, it is way in favor of inuh, but amazingly, Jinro just seems so far so comfortable. I mean, already getting the expansion up, already having some more units out. I mean, look at the unit counting station. 8 for Jinro, 1 Banshee, 4 Hellions out right now. A Raven can get that tank started as well. Oh, it looks like we might be having a mech style from Jinro. And everything from inuh just looks behind. This is always the big curse whenever you go for Blue Flame Hellions, the fact that, you know what, those things are so far out of the way of what you'd want to be doing that it just costs you so much money and time just to start getting Blue Flame Hellions. But Jinro, oh, you suave Swede, you. He's going to be going for a big mech play. No reason to get a second factory with a reactor unless, ooh, wow. Really wanting to get a lot of Hellions up very early on, and looks like he's going to be donating to starport the reactor as well. inuh now returning back home with his medevac, has those tanks sieged, complete and total defensive positioning by inuh, and I just cannot believe to say this, but Jinro is way ahead given the food counts. I mean, in the units lost tab, gosh, it's huge, huge in favor of the red player. But I mean, so far, Jinro is just doing great. He's just great. Whoa, what happened to the SCV production? inuh, look, Jinro's already caught back up. And looks like we do have a Banshee from Dr. Jinro Vioso moving in, trying to target fires. Got to be a little bit careful. There's the cloak for the retreat. Can possibly snipe off a couple of Marines, but wants to keep darting back so that way he can get out of the way of a scan. Oh, rough spot there for inuh. Doesn't actually get the opportunity to pick off that final last Banshee. And, you know, I honestly would say that my 2 favorite units for Terran are Hellions and Vikings because they are so fast and they cover so much distance so quickly. We do see Vikings popping out now for Jinro. He does have the Hellions in production. Ooh, a first tank as well. Another factory going down from Jinro. Some amazing add-on swapping going on by Jinro too. Jinro now just positioning himself in the front. There's really not much that inuh can do about this. Jinro actually has a good opportunity to take an easier third. And look at that, pokes with 1 Hellion. Playing very well, and right now inuh is in total lockdown mode despite that huge damage that he did early on. Now, it does appear that inuh is going for the very fast stim. This is a very typical formation to have these 2 barracks and whatnot, but looks like he's still unaware of the big mech play that Jinro is doing. Because if he did know that Blue Flame Hellions were out on the field and increasing in number, he would likely be very wary of increasing that Marine count. More missile turrets going down by inuh, who I think is honestly playing a little bit too safe. I mean, we have 5, 6 here, and then there's 7. Is there an 8th one? Yeah, that's so much money. That's like 2 command centers worth of missile turrets just around the map. And in the meantime, Jinro looks like he just doesn't have any. In fact, if there's one reason why I had to point to Jinro as having the lead at this point, it would be the fact that there's so many missile turrets that have been thrown down. Alright, so inuh, at the very least, is aware of the Hellions, as the smoldering carcass that is on the ground would indicate. We see the Hellions now being joined by, wow, everything else. This is a very small, focused force. Is siege down for Jinro? He has siege and he has Blue Flame Hellions. inuh doing the usual standards. The Marine tank, but that This one single Raven could do some huge tide turning. That's really what's going to need help pulling ahead. There's the trading going on. We see, oh, looks like Jinro's trying to push into the backside. The tanks siege up from the back. And the Blue Flame Hellions get a horrific angle. Oh no, Jinro completely losing absolutely everything. This is an atrocious spot. Oh, Jinro just tossed away a huge amount of units. And will he lose this last Viking? I mean, that was pretty straightforward and solid control there by inuh, but Jinro just tossed a whole army out the window. I mean, the units lost tab. Is it not amazing that Jinro's actually ahead in food right now? I mean, I keep talking about Jinro, you know, like very, very differentially. Oh, how impressive it is that he's ahead. But I mean, look at this unit's lost tab. This could be smaller for Jinro, having lost more than double his opponent. Ooh, blah, blah. And it looks like inuh going to take the opportunity, going to push forward, and Jinro not really having that many units, but going for it. This could be exactly what Jinro needs. We see the tanks sieging up at the back line, and now we have a lot of SCVs moving down the front. And there we see explosions galore. Oh, there's a lot of SCVs moving down the front. The Blue Flame Hellions ripping everything apart, and I think for once Jinro might be able to get the better edge in a battle, and it looks like he's managed to take it out for the most part. But where'd those SCVs go? Oh, I have an idea where they went. 34 workers killed thus far. In the unit counting station, we see that still Jinro is not very far behind his opponent, inuh. inuh, I just don't think has been particularly good about his SCV production. We do see, wow, it looks like a couple of guys have been pulled off mining this gas geyser, likely due to some of that earlier harassment. Now, it looks like he's taking control of the essential Xel'Naga Watchtower. Essential because not only does it divide the map, but also Blue Flame Hellions getting completely shut down. Will they get anything extra? Oh, they do manage to get one SCV. Hey, how's that for a good deal? So this is not only important because it gives you control over this center path, but also this is a big expansion point that Jinro desperately needs. Marine continuing to move up to the left side of the map. Passing by, checking to make sure that there's no thirds. Much of the late game is all about expansion management. Got to make sure your opponent is not expanding at a rate that is surprising to you, or even if he is, how do you exploit that? Jinro's in an awkward spot. He can't move up. You see that there are now Vikings being joined by this largely tank force. There's only 4 Hellions out on the field right now for Jinro. He's moving up. And wow, he will be taking this one. A little bit surprising. I mean, expected in that, you know, there's a complete siege going on here. But surprising for Jinro because this is generally not what you see out of a meching player. Meching players want to stay more tightly compacted together because siege tanks only operate well when sieged up, which means that they must be still. So if you have less places you have to worry about, it's reasonable and reassuring to be nice and still and silent with those tanks. But it looks like inuh has effectively evened the game up. We still see that, again, Jinro is pulling ahead in terms of worker count. You know, it's one of those amazing things that happens when you spend a million years in South Korea training as a pro. Those little basics, never forgetting SCV production, will always let you pull farther and farther ahead if your opponent's making that blunder. I mean, inuh has essentially played brilliantly up to this point in time. Completely crushed all the attacks that Jinro did, pulled out tons of SCVs, picked them off en masse. And yet, because inuh has not been producing those SCVs constantly, Jinro has been able to pull quite a far ways ahead. An attempted drop going on by inuh. He's trying to move his medevacs in any position he can to do any damage, because now all of a sudden comes what many think is the start of a dry period in this matchup, when the map becomes divided, and red will take the right half of the map, conquering the bottom right natural and the bottom right main. And yellow, Jinro, he'll conquer his left half. However, keep in mind, though, these drops can be absolutely brutal. Can completely peel all those defensive lines apart. And if you are going to be a meching player, you have to go crazy with missile turrets. You need lots of Vikings. Jinro smartly positioning all his Vikings to where they can get to the tanks fast, but most importantly, they need to be able to defend this front from drops. If you do not go over the top with your missile turret production, you run the risk of having any defensive position broken. And if you have to begin rearranging while your opponent is barreling down your throat with Marine Marauder, it's a terrible spot to be in. We see the good old emphasis on the Marauders. Smart transition from inuh if he's going Marine Marauder. No reason not to just get those anti-tank, anti-Hellion units. There's, it appears, the break from inuh. Manages to drop, smashes down this small line of tanks, and the only thing Jinro can do is pull huge tank numbers up We see even a tank from inuh hopping into the fray, not being able to do as much damage, but a big blow was dealt by inuh, delaying this expansion. If he can pick off his command center, that would be even bigger, but it looks like no. Jinro will be able to keep his units alive. But here's the problem. inuh sees it, he scans, he sees there are not that many units there anymore. We see the Hellions rushing up, the Marauders surrounding everything. Incredibly good push right now by inuh. We see all the siege up going on at the backside. We see that there is more tanks from Jinro trying to sprint forward, but the Marauders are picking down these unenforced tanks extremely easily. I mean, great play by Jinro getting these Banshees up. This might be his one saving grace in this entire battle. He's had his defensive positioning shattered. And now we see, amazingly, inuh was not able to break through. We'll have to retreat back to the friendliness of these missile turrets. We'll try to take down the Banshees. Does get one. Second one does manage to clean up the small Marine force. inuh taking his 4th base, having his 3rd well established, still not having enough guys in gas, still has that one in both geysers in the main. Wow, no wonder he's making more Marines. There's the command center going down for Jinro at the north position. Jinro is expanding far more rapidly than one would expect with mech, but I think that Jinro is just trying to get into total lockdown mode. He's producing a lot of air units as well, Viking, Banshee. The air units are used to combat this excess of drops that we're going to see come from inuh. Could become worse over time. Because if you're a meching player, what you want is big, strong, powerful surges forward on the field. You want to be able to take your tanks, siege up, crush this, and begin slowly drilling forward. If you're playing a style like inuh, you want to try to find small little tiny cracks in his armor and just drill in with huge amounts of units. There's the air upgrade going down for inuh, who just still does not really have that much gas. I can tell he wants to get a lot more Vikings into this mix, because if he can control the skies, then he's going to be in great shape. He can easily destroy these Viking numbers and begin slowly working his way forward with these tanks. But I mean, now finally putting 3 in the gas, still only having 1 in both main geysers. There's a fusion core going down. We could begin seeing battle cruisers in a moment, but inuh should absolutely not do this until he has good air control, until he is dominating in the Viking count. Some awkward positioning here from inuh. He's trying to sneak his way forward. But Jinro right now seems to have a reasonable lockdown on it. Still has to be careful. Those Banshees are surging forward, and the tanks, oh, wow, doing some big damage. Oh, no, Marines. No one told you to do that, Marines. Nobody on the planet Earth told you to do that. We see more sensor towers going down. Banshees continuing to pick units off, and I mean, this combo Banshee tank play by Jinro, very expensive. But because Jinro is expanding so much, it's allowing him to slowly break farther and farther forward. Against mech play, you generally see Tank Marauder as a response to the Tank Hellion, but rarely do you see these Banshees thrown into the mix, and it is throwing inuh off in all sorts of crazy ways. And now Jinro making another push to the front. Jinro slowly chipping forward. Oh, great positioning by Jinro. It looks like Jinro's going to be able to break through the center. The Marauders, the Vikings, none of them are on stim. They all went off on their own to attack, and now we again have these 3 Banshees that are going to clean these tanks up. Jinro has a huge lead with this great play. Just cleaned the center up, and now the siege tanks advancing forward, going to be able to take out the missile turrets. Incredibly solid positioning. But with a play as slow as mech, Jinro needs to begin encroaching forward. If he can just control this center strip, then he can siege up the right base, he can siege up the bottom right. And it looks like that's exactly what Jinro wants to do. He's sieging up the watchtowers and instead trying to snake his way down to the bottom right side. We see the missile turrets are up. He cannot advance with those air units, but he will easily be able to pick it off with these unsieged tanks. We see the high-sec auto-tracking, the missile turret, and planetary fortress range upgrade being researched. Jinro does have 1 single blue flame Hellion there, off doing his own thing in the bottom right to harass whenever something plops down underneath him. And we see inuh with a reasonably safe 4th. He has a lot of units out here in the center. But if you go to the unit counting station, you see 16 tanks for Jinro, 16 Vikings as well. That is a hard army to break, and Jinro making the big play. Oh, the 3rd completely undefended. inuh. Oh, the Jinro fans love it. They're screaming and clapping and telling their wives. They're getting together, and as a family reunion activity, they're drawing pictures of their superhero suite, destroying command centers. And per usual, there's the hair dryer that pops out of every orbital command. Hopefully, we will see many more hair dryers created by Jinro's aggression throughout this game. With that one fusion core up, we have not yet seen any sort of battlecruiser play go on, but the amount of scans going off is mind-blowing. Players non-stop rechecking what the other is doing. In the unit counting station, we do see that Jinro is still ahead. He has 18 tanks, 17 Vikings. If that Viking count from inuh can get high enough, he can overtake control of the skies, kill off the Banshees, and start encroaching back on those tank lines. But we see that there are 3 sensor towers well positioned across the map. Another armory going down by Jinro, who realizes that he actually doesn't have any upgrades at all. 2 armories actually in production. Meanwhile, we do see that inuh has good upgrades on almost everything. 1-0 air, 1-0 ground, and 2-1 infantry. But with this many tanks and Vikings, I mean, Jinro doesn't even really need attack upgrades at this point. He just needs to make sure he doesn't let his opponent retake these 2 bases. Because if we have an even map split, but I have +2 mining bases on you, you are effed, my friend, said Sean with remarkable consideration to the age of viewers. More missile turrets going down by inuh. I don't know if I necessarily like this play in general, but I mean, given this gigantic air force that we're seeing Jinro play around with, it seems to make sense to me. And there's the push forward using the vision range of those Vikings, and now it looks like Jinro is just looking for any little hole in the armor, and it looks like it's this south side. There's not enough tanks. It's a vulnerable point. Jinro's pulling around, does pick off a tank. There's 1 Banshee out. Jinro's going to scan and annihilate that immediately. Never mind, he has a Raven. That was a lot easier than I would have thought. There's another point defense drone going down right now. Banshee's trying to sneak forward. This is still the vulnerable spot. inuh knows it, so he is going to try to drop mules to repair, but oh no, without any vision. inuh cannot see it. There's the scan from inuh to try to pick it off a little bit, but all the infantry are going to dart forward. Jinro is slowly extending this lead more and more and more, and it looks like inuh has to retreat, has a 1 hit point tank retreating. Incredibly good positioning by Jinro, slow and steady as can be, but it looks like the point defense drones have been thrown down. It's a Viking on Viking battle. Jinro with the enormous lead decimates it. inuh delays the push by picking off some of those tanks, but we see that Jinro has many more tanks at the back line. 1 more Banshee out from inuh, cleaning units up. Another scan, and it looks like Jinro will be one-shotting every single one of these Banshees. The single Banshee from Jinro is all that remains. More Vikings being produced by inuh, trying to get some kind of air control back. The longer inuh has no air control, the more difficult it is for him to hold off this gigantic wall of tanks encroaching forward. Oh my gosh, more units swinging forward. We see all the infantry. The SCVs from Jinro joining into the fray. In the production tab, we see Jinro actually does not have that many more tanks, still favoring huge air, going half and half. The only thing he is not making is barracks units. No upgrades on those as of yet. We do see that those factories are busy upgrading. The first set of upgrades for Jinro. The only way he's really behind at this point in time. And upon clearing out those missile turrets, now all of a sudden Jinro has an opportunity to do some pushing at the south side. There's virtually nothing here to defend it, and in fact, it would be hard to reinforce if Jinro can inch the tanks forward a little bit more. It would actually be smart for him to drop all his Vikings and push into this bottom right expansion. That's a play that a lot of Terrans don't do unless their name is TLO, in which case TLO, he'll build Vikings and just never have them in the air all game long because he values the way they work on ground. TLO, you're crazy. More tanks advancing forward by Dr. Jinro Vioso. The scan, non-stop scans going on. If either player starts to inch his way forward, the other needs to respawn and reposition his tanks. Here comes the Vikings, but no, they're just going to reposition briefly, and it looks like inuh going to try to go for a little bit of a goofy counterattack, but he still might be able to actually sneak his way all the way in here. And it looks like the defense line is fairly thin, but a smattering of Blue Flame Hellions, cleaning it up with relative ease. Everything gets cooked in a nice 4th of July fashion, for those of you who live in America. More siege tanks up right now for Liquid Jinro. He's going to continue to try to push, and again, as long as he can prevent his opponent from taking this expansion and this expansion, he will win the war of attrition. There's the rescan going on, and it looks like, inuh might be thinking about trying to push in a moment. But more scans going on left and right. It's an important moment for Jinro that he not let this line be broken. He's a little bit skimpy on the defense at the north end, and he sieges his tanks up just in time, and there's the stim in the dart forward, but it looks like there's going to be absolutely no way. Holy crap, Jinro has so much stuff. The Boa Constrictor style Terran. And I gotta admit, this is very, very good play by Jinro. I cannot tell you how easy it is to mess this up, and that's why this game is going for so long. Jinro taking very careful steps forward, but the Thors are in the front line. The Thors are amazing at absorbing all the siege tank damage, and it looks like inuh may have broken this defensive line. The air and ground units were not there to defend, and inuh, again, making a great play, has managed to break one of the key defensive lines for Jinro. If he can do a re-push and take down this top side, he might be in even better shape. And there he is going forward. It looks like it's an almost entirely metal army by inuh. And Jinro having a little bit of a vulnerability here, not having these tanks well defended. If he loses these tanks, that would, of course, be huge. But, I mean, Jinro may have overinvested in all these air units, wanted to maintain that air control, but now we see a giant force rolling in via the ground, and all the Vikings land. Perfect timing by Jinro, and we see that inuh is just stuck in this bottleneck. Tanks raining down, the slow Vikings even able to chase down the Thors. This is something you just really do not see in StarCraft 2. What moves faster on ground, a Thor or a Viking? Don't worry, I'm checking in the match for GSPA. The unfortunate truth is that Vikings are pretty atrocious against Marauders. Marauders pretty much eat those alive, but we see Jinro has 1, 2, 3, 4 more bases than inuh. Inuh's running low on his third. His fourth is essentially the only reliable source of income for the next several minutes. And Jinro continuing his Boa Constrictor style, doesn't want to give up any edge at this point. She needs to maintain this stranglehold, and eventually inuh will run out of money. Just managing them bases, baby. It is so important to manage expansions. If you just focus on controlling where your opponent expands, you often never need to attack in the first place. More Vikings popping out for Dr. Jinrovioso, and a battlecruiser. Ooh. Are there any more starports around here? No, they're up here, are they? Ooh, battlecruisers. Battlecruisers. And this is the smartest play that you can make when you have that many Vikings. It's very easy to fall into that trap of saying, I need to have air control, I need my tanks to have that vision range advantage, and to overproduce air. And if you are in that spot where you have huge amounts of air, you can just say to yourself, well, since I have control of the air, I may as well get these battlecruisers. What really is good against battlecruisers on the ground? Marines, Thors, LOL. Of course not. That's so wrong. Banshee now trying to advance forward, and he is not going to be in for a good surprise when he finds out that there is a fleet of battlecruisers there. That is all inuh needed to see. And we even see the weapon refit, the Yamato cannon going down. And inuh just desperately trying to get a good enough army to break slow siege tanks. inuh trying to advance forward, loses another orbital command, and a second hairdryer makes an appearance on the field. To rescan Jinro, well aware that his army has been completely revealed, but he does not care. He has those battlecruisers. The BCs take no damage from these Thors, just none. I mean, the battlecruisers already have huge armor. They have... Oh, I have a Viking selected. They have 3 armor plating. That means the Vikings are basically doing 4 damage per missile. There are Vikings out right now for inuh, but we can see the battlecruisers just working through them, and here the Viking fleet arrives for Jinro, advancing forward, just trying to clear up to maintain that air dominance. Missile turrets doing big damage to the battlecruisers. But we see there's the kill on one Thor. Can he pick off the other turret before the battlecruiser dies? No, he cannot. But still, Jinro progresses forward. Look at how little damage is being dealt. Gosh, almost 15 damage a shot. That is the best the Thor can do. So now we see the complete and total unsiege by inuh, the siege unsiege pullback, and another pair of battlecruisers. Jinro doing a great job of this, but inuh, look at this with the offensive muling, doing a lot of damage to those tanks. Are almost all in yellow at least. And there's the stim forward. inuh making a final attempt, but it will not work. And there's the good game. Jinro takes a win. with his 3G. He apparently won this game on his cell phone provider. Very, very solid play by Jinro. I mean, I cannot emphasize to you enough how easy it is to lose with a mech style of play, especially if you're focusing largely on tanks and slow tank lines. You unsiege in one bad position one time, and the Marauder player busts down far more tanks than he has Marauders. Just huge numbers of tanks can be swept up clean. We even saw earlier in the game, inuh nearly broke this defensive position just by forcing Jinro to be unsieged and to move up to the top. But once Jinro got this gigantic swell of air units, we saw inuh regrettably stop dropping, completely abandon all air control for much of the game, and Jinro slowly repositioned his way forward to be able to take a win here in game number 1. Let's see if Jinro can pull off that 2-0 victory, or whether inuh will have a comeback in him. Let's find out in game number 2.